Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Navarro. I'm a songwriter, singer, artist, touring and recording, and a voice actor, and also an activist. And I'm here today to talk to you in Ralph Jacquedine's class about what I do and how I got started. Now, I'd be with you today were it not for this bug that's going around. So we figured this might be the next best thing. And I know I'll be speaking to some of you live on Zoom at some point. I've been blessed to have a long and productive career with ups and downs in all of those fields. As a songwriter, I've written some hit songs. I've put out more than a dozen albums as an artist. I've toured several thousand dates as a touring artist, and have done dozens of movies, TV shows, and commercials as a singer and a voice actor. Voice over, but also doing characters. I got started by studying music at UCLA in the 1970s. I was a choral major, but I also focused on songwriting, and there was no songwriting major or popular music major or contemporary recording major at UCLA at that point in time. Some of the blessings that you guys have at Berklee School, we didn't really have. So it was a bit of a challenge. But you found ways, especially living in Los Angeles, you could get onto the clubs. There were always people from the record business around, and you could learn some stuff. You could focus. By the time that I left school, I started playing the local clubs and started focusing on songwriting. And a couple of years after I left UCLA, I got my first shot with a song of mine that was recorded by an artist on CBS Records on Columbia. The song didn't do that well. The record didn't do that well. But it kind of put me on my way. It got me into a community, and I started working with other people and interfacing with other people and sort of learning the ropes and making friends and doing what you do when you're out there hustling, trying to make something happen. I use the word hustle, not in that it was any kind of scam or any kind of hucksterism. It was really more about making friends, contacts, networking, learning your craft, learning from others, and just putting it out there and getting the necessary feedback. After several years, a few years after that cut came out in 1976, that's how long it's been, and the second cut in 1977, I took a few years off from that. I went to work as a singing waiter at a restaurant, which was a dead-end job. A lot of people would go there thinking they were being musicians, but we were waiters who were playing guitars and singing songs. In this dead-end job, I met a gentleman named Eric Lowen, who also worked there, and the two of us started working together. And that's the guy who became my lifelong partner, an over 30-year partnership, having written a ton of songs, recorded a lot of records as part of Lowen and Navarro. And through this work, we finally succeeded. Well, in that time, I also started working as an assistant to a manager who was representing a couple of acts on labels, and also he represented a group called the Do-Rocks on Capitol. He had Jack Nietzsche, the producer, arranger, composer, who had worked with Phil Spector and became a successful producer and film composer at that point in time. My boss went to go live in London and work over there representing the Moody Blues. And I went as his assistant and learned a ton. I read every contract I had. I was his assistant. I was a secretary. I read every contract I had to file. I listened in on most of his phone calls and learned the ropes of how the music business went, which was anathema to an artist at that point in time. Like, do I want to get my hands dirty with this business stuff? Well, I learned enough to protect myself throughout my career with or without able management. And it's something that's never failed me to have learned those lessons. I came back to the United States at the very tail end of 1980 and started working in a band with Eric Lowen and pumped that baby into the ground until it died an ugly death. We got close to a couple of deals and nothing happened. But during that period, especially at the end of that period, after that band broke up, Eric and I were fortunate enough to write a song one evening in 1983 that became a worldwide top 5 hit. That song is We Belong, that Pat Benatar recorded. You've heard it in movies, you've heard it in commercials. It's become a classic. I'm not saying that with any immodesty. I'm stunned. But what I've also learned from that process is what can happen when you create something that hits a kind of critical mass where it gets across generations and formats and outlives its time, transcends its time. I thought if we were lucky, we would have a few years of money off of that and be able to build something more. And we did dive in and work hard, writing with everybody, trying to write for everybody. We had a few successes. We wound up in that period getting cuts with other artists, like I got a Dionne Warwick cut, Nile Rodgers, the producer, cut one of our songs, and around 1987, Eric and I started working with the Bangles and wrote 3 songs that they recorded, and it was a career, but we wanted to do more, so we went to some little neighborhood bar and started playing as an acoustic duo. And figured, let's have some fun doing this. We were not really succeeding as artists. Every time we tried, it failed. But the songwriting was working really well. And in the course of going out there and doing what we loved, instead of trying to meet a market and trying to do what we thought was cool or what we thought was happening, we did what we loved. And 2 years after we started doing that, we made our first record for a small label called Chameleon that was distributed by Capitol. That went very well as we got on some 50 AAA radio stations nationwide, including KBCO. I'm sorry, WKBCO. That's in Boulder, Colorado. WBOS in your neighborhood. Before it was a country station or whatever it might be right now. We met everyone. We played on all of these stations. We went to all the conferences. We went to all the conventions and played for everybody. Because we were acoustic, we could also play live in their offices, and that really worked for us. We were at a stage where we thought things were going really well, and the label closed its doors at the tail end of 1990. We put our first record out in 1990. This was some 10, 11 years after he and I started working together, by the way. A couple of years later, we wound up, we lost that deal. The record company went under for a while, and we, 3 years later, ended up on Mercury Records, a major label distributed by Universal. And that went very well as well. We continued to grow as artists and toured our butts off. We went from the independent label to the major label. That lasted for 2 more records. By 1996, we ended up at another independent, and by 1999, we were on our own and started our own label, Red Hen Records. And we put out something on the order of about 8 releases on that label, selling fewer units per release, but making a lot more money, and toured like crazy. This sustained us as artists because what we discovered out there is that the connection with an audience gave us legs way beyond our purported shelf life as recording artists. The labels may have gone away, but the people didn't. And we did it by building a sort of fan loyalty that isn't crass and isn't calculated and isn't according to some plan. We did what we loved the people who we did it for, and engendered a sense of connection that we couldn't have predicted, except that we really liked what we did and didn't want to go out of business. So we kept going. In the midst of all of that, I got an opportunity in the late 80s to start singing in commercials as a Spanish language jingle singer. From that, the experience mutated, if that's the right word, into singing on Spanish language movies, then singing in English language movies. Then around 1994, someone said, hey, come do a voiceover. And all of a sudden, I wound up the voice of Southern California Toyota dealers in Spanish, doing 3 commercials every 2 months. From that, I got an agent. From that, I started branching out into other things, and in 2000 started doing the beginnings of character voices on animated series and occasionally animated features. The whole time, by the way, I'm singing in movies. My resume is pretty long. You can check it out on IMDb, but I sang in the movies The Lorax, Coco, Rio, Happy Feet 1, Happy Feet 2, Ice Age 2, Ice Age 3, The Emperor's New Groove, The Mexican, played a character in The Book of Life where I played Chacal, saying things like, I hate bullfighters, and I found that making stupid voices with my stupid mouth meant I could keep on working as a stupid voice actor. It's just something that I did. There's a little key. If you can think it, you can do it. If you can't do it, try. If you fail, keep trying. We'll get down into that in a little minute.